Recently, I saw Salman Rushdie, who is a personal hero of mine, give an interview where he both condemned and defended the anti-Islamic film The Innocence of Muslims. This is important because he's defining the difference between personal opinion and freedom of speech. You can both hate this movie and defend its right to exist. The movie is pretty awful. Ridiculously low production values. They seriously spent $5 million on this pig? I think someone should call Internal Revenue, because I think $4.9 million must have been spent on blowing cocaine up the noses of $5 a night hookers. The maker of this film is clearly a douchebag. He identified himself falsely as a Jew at first. It's obvious he did this to deliberately cause misdirected rage. He lied to the actors in the film. Maybe he did this to protect the actors, so they would have an out and not be held responsible for the film. The actors are suing the producer, so they're definitely not happy about being deceived. If you're going to make a movie like this, don't be so flipping dodgy about it. If you're going to thumb your nose at Islam, then thumb your nose. Do it straight up and sign your name to it. That's what I did. That's what several thousand other people I know did when Draw a Cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad Day came around. We parodied Islam, belittled the Prophet, and signed our names to it in a proud act of defiance to say we are not afraid. We didn't trick some poor artist into making a cartoon for us and then change the content without informing the creator and then try to falsely pin the whole thing on Jews while ducking and running for cover. No one I know of did this, but if someone did, then that person would be a douchebag. The filmmaker is facing all kinds of legal problems. However, the charges he faces has nothing to do with the content of the film. Nakula Basili Nakula pleaded no contest to federal charges of bank fraud in 2010. In 2011, he was released from prison on conditions of his parole that he could not assume aliases or use a computer and the internet. It's pretty obvious he violated all of these conditions. I think it's important to emphasize that Nakula is not in trouble with the law because he made a film that insulted Islam. He would be in the exact same trouble he is in right now, regardless of what the film was about. I, for one, don't believe this movie is responsible for the outrage in the Middle East. I think it was simply chosen for something that was pre-planned. But I want to put that opinion aside for the moment and talk about the dangers of the movie The Innocence of Muslims being banned or even being declared criminal. If you want the movie The Innocence of Muslims declared illegal, there's two things I want you to do to justify this. The first thing I want you to do, change the context of the film. Think of this as a movie where it is no longer about the Prophet Muhammad. Pretend it is about a totally fictional character, say some guy named Fred. Then thoroughly deconstruct the film, going over the parts you think should be banned, because they're considered offensive in their own right, not just because they belittle a prophet. You may find this is not doable. If you do find something you want to ban, then compare what you want banned to mainstream media and see how much of that would have to be banned on the same grounds. You may find this will lead you to a pretty uncomfortable place. This is the second thing I want you to do. Leave the context in. Say this film and its content is to be banned because it is offensive to Islam. Then ask yourself, do you live in a nation that is governed by theocratic law? If not, then if a law is passed to ban the innocence of Muslims on the grounds of sacrilege, then that will no longer be true. This one law would literally change the nature of law in your nation. You better think through what this could ultimately mean. Could you go to jail for sacrilege? Could you go to jail for blasphemy? Could you go to jail just because you said God damn it? For the rest of this film, I would like to hand the lecture over to someone who has a great deal of experience in fighting for freedom and democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, Sir Winston Churchill.
Thank you for that very kind introduction. Cat Boy, is it?
Yeah.
Does your mother know that you're dressed like that, young man?
Mom's kinda out of the loop on this one.
Yes, well, I think that should be wise. At one time, long ago, when the nations were ruled by the great heathen kings of old, the world was governed to some extent, in whole or in part, by religious laws. But as we became more democratic and gained more freedom, acts of sacrilege were stricken from the books. As law became more secular, it progressively became less and less interested in interfering with the moral choices people make, and progressively became more and more concerned with strictly non-spiritual manners. This is what a civilized society does. Passing a law banning what is offensive to Islam is a step backwards, I fear, by hundreds of years at least. It puts sacrilege back in the law books where it was cast out ages ago, and for good reason. What makes it worse is it's sacrilege that is not even of a religion that most of us pray to ourselves. For most of us, what is seen as a foreign religion would have reached into our tiny island and dictated terms to us. This would be a most disturbing precedent of all. Islam already has control over international bodies who hold authority in the United Nations, and would seek to pass international laws to supplant our liberties with their religious law. This same body does absolutely nothing to bring light to the countless acts of moral depravity and supreme barbarism that occurs daily within these Islamic nations. These same nations have the audacity to tell us how we are to conduct ourselves morally according to their religious standards. As I speak, people in Islamic nations are rioting in the streets, murdering their own people, and burning their own theaters to the ground overreaction to a movie that most of them could not have seen themselves. These are not people who are qualified by any means to dictate moral standards for the world to follow. When their wrath is spent, they will stand among the ruinous ashes of their own nations, and the world will see these people have no business attempting to govern the world, as they cannot even govern themselves in a civilized manner. Many years ago, those of the ruling class sought to silence what they called juvenile agitators, who were speaking up in protest of Hitler's and Goering's rise to power without election. These juvenile agitators are made up of the very same like-minded young men and women our nation stands behind in a time of war. They refused to remain quiet when they saw their leaders do everything they could to appease dishonorable men. Dishonorable men who have every intention to honor no treaty, to respect no border, to violate every sovereignty and every human decency, and strong-arm that twisted idealism upon the world. The appeasers of these dishonorable men did what they could to quiet our juvenile agitators, for fear the Nazis might be offended as their jack-booted thugs sought to march down Whitehall. There were those of us who would not be silenced, for they knew, as I know now, there will come a moment where we will have to stand our ground and fight if we are intent upon remaining British. Over the centuries, many conquerors threatened they would hang their flag from the mast at Buckingham Palace, the imperial crest of the Emperor Napoleon, the swastika of the Third Reich, Now it is the crescent moon and star of Islam which would seek to supplant the royal standard and the Union Jack. Even though large tracts of Europe and many old famous states may fall to Sharia law, we shall not flag or fail. We will go to the end. We shall support the ban of the burqa in France. We shall fight them on the tabloids and the beat. We shall fight in growing confidence and growing strength in all forums of social media. We shall defend our liberties, whatever the cost may be. We shall defeat their UN resolutions. We shall rebuke their Islamic councils. We shall resist their self-appointed Matuin from policing our streets. We shall fight them on the telly. We shall never surrender. And even if, which I do not for a moment believe, the internet, or large part of it, was subjugated by religious law, we shall fight to reclaim our online communities from their tyranny and keep the World Wide Web as it was meant to be, open-sourced, open-minded, and unhindered by dominionism. Until then, my good people, keep calm and carry on.